Magic phase is the phase when your wizards will attempt to cast spells and your opponent can attempt to dispel them. All of your mages may have some levels. For an example, you have an adept, an apprentice, and a master. Apprentice knows only one spell. Adept knows 2 spells, and these spells may be selected from a range from 1 till 5, and master is knowing 3 spells with the full range of its discipline. Magic sequence. You start the magic phase, you draw a flux card, you siphon the veil, you cast a spell with one of your models, you repeat the step 4 for each spell the active player wishes to cast, and end the magic phase. All of your wizards may channel your spells. Wizard apprentice cannot channel spells, adepts can channel 1 spell, masters can channel 1 spell, and +1 to casting modifier. Each of your wizards has to choose an available path of magic to select spells from. The chosen path of magic has to be written down in your army list. In the magic phase, spells are cast and dispelled using a pool of dice called the magic dices. The number of magic dices each player receives in each magic phase is determined by which flux cards are drawn and what decisions are made during the siphon the veil. Any unused magic dice at the end of the magic phase are discarded. Each player has a deck consisting of the 8 flux cards, given in figure. During step 2 of the magic phase, the reactive player randomly draws one of the flux cards from the active player's deck. This card determines how many starting magic dice both players receive in the magic phase, and how many veil tokens the active player receives. Once a flux card had been drawn, it is discarded from the deck. The remaining flux cards in the decks are open information to both players. Here you can see the flux cards. While you're on the siphon the veil, the active player creates a new pool of veil tokens that will last until their next siphon the veil phase. Add the number of veil token left in their previous veil token pool. Add the number of veil tokens given by the flux card drawn its player turn. Add veil tokens from other sources such as channel or your altars or something else. Active player must discard veil tokens from their veil token pool until it contains no more than 3 tokens. The remaining veil tokens are saved to be added to the veil token pool in the active player's magic phase. The spells are cast during the magic phase, and most spells belong to a specific path of magic. On every spell you may see the actual spell properties: spell classification, spell name, casting value, type, duration, and effect. The actual spell classification is about the following categories. Learned spells. All spells labeled with a number are learned spells, which are the main spells of a path. They are usually numbered from 1 to 6, which is relevant for the spell selection rules. Each player may only attempt to cast each learned spell once per magic phase. We have hereditary spells. Most army books contain a hereditary spell, which is labeled H instead of a number. All your wizards know this spell when they are selecting their path. Also, we are having the attribute spells. Attribute spells are labeled A, and all wizards that know at least one spell from a path of magic automatically know the attribute spell from that path. Some spells are replicable. The learned spells are replicable spells and are labeled rep. The player may attempt to cast replicable spell multiple times in the same magic phase, but each wizard may only make a single attempt. Bound spells are classified as bound, which follow the different rules than above. The current spell types are augment, aura, caster, caster unit, damage, direct, focused, ground, hex, missile, and ranged. Range. Augment spell is the spell that may only target a friendly units. Aura spell has an aura effect for all units within the range. Caster. The spell targets only the model casting the spell. Caster's unit. The spell targets only the caster's unit. Damage spell. Spell may only target units not currently engaged in combat. Direct spell may only target units and/or models in the caster's front arc. Focus spell may only target single models. If the target is a multi-part model, only one model part may be the target. Ground spells doesn't target units or models. Instead, the target is a point on the battlefield. Hex spell may only target enemy units. Missile spell may only target units and/or models within the caster's line of sight. It cannot be cast if the caster is engaged in combat. Spell range X has a maximum casting range. Only targets within X may be chosen. The casting range is always indicated in the corresponding column in the spell's profile. Note that any effects that alter the spell's range do not affect any other distance specifications that may be part of the spell's effect. Spell's duration may be instant, one turn, or permanent. Instant is the effect of the spell, has no lasting duration. Effects are applied when the spell is cast. Permanent is the effect of the spell that lasts until the end of the game or until a designated ending condition is met. Spell casting sequence. Casting attempt, dispelling attempt. In case of broken concentration, you may skip steps from D to A. In the dispelling attempt, you skip steps from C to F. Resolve the spell effect. If applicable, choose target for the attribute spell and resolve its effect. If applicable, apply the miscast effect. If you're casting a spell, you roll a number of dice representing your casting roll. For an example, if your cast roll is 6+, you may use 1 dice, 2 dice, and so on. But actually, you should remember that you should use amount of dice that will increase your percentage in attempting to cast spell successfully. Dispelling player or reactive player may choose to dispel. After that, he is also rolling an amount of dice to exceed your current number on the spell cast. Also, you are having some miscast effects. On this table, you can see the miscast effects as it is. In the shooting phase, models with shooting attacks get a chance to use them. The current shooting phase sequence is: start of the shooting phase, select one of the units to perform a shooting attack, repeat step 2 with a different unit that has not performed a shooting attack during this phase. When all units that can shoot have done so, the shooting phase ends. You choose your unit, select your weapon's profile, you check the current range between you and the enemy unit, you apply modifiers to it, and you are trying to shoot with your weapon. When you are aiming, you are making to hit roll. On this table you may see the summary of to hit modifiers. Actually, it's long range if your unit is accurate. If you moved with your unit and trying to shoot, if you're having quick to fire, unwieldy, or if you are having both. If you're having stand and shoot, and if your target has soft cover, hard cover, and hard target. Also, we are having 3 rules for the cover. Determine which arc of the target the shooting model is located in. Choose any point on the shooting model front facing. For targets on rectangular basis, from the chosen point, check now large the fraction on the target facing that is behind obstructions. If half or more of the target's facing is obscured, the target have benefits from cover. For targets on round basis, from the chosen point, check whether the nearest point of the target's facing, referred to as a target point, is behind obstructions. If this point is obscured, the target benefits from cover. Note that this is not line of sight. Check what is behind obstructions even outside of the shooting model front arc. Models always ignore their own unit and the terrain feature they are inside for cover purposes. Models with soft cover do not block line of sight except if the target and or the shooting model is of gigantic height. On these figures you may see the example of soft cover inside the terrain feature. Also, you are having the hopeless shots. It's the actual shooting attack that is equal to 7+. You roll a 6 and after that you roll one more time and you should need to have a successful roll of 4+. Here you may see the example of hard cover for the units. On this figure you can see the soft cover from intervening models for the standard, gigantic and large height. In melee phase, both players' units engaged in combat must attack. Here is the current melee phase sequence. Start of a melee phase. Apply any instances of no longer engaged. The active player chooses a combat that has not already been fought during this melee phase. Fight a round of combat. Repeat steps 2-4. Once all units that were engaged in combat at the start of the phase have fought, melee phase ends. A combat is defined as a group of opposing units that are all connected through base contact. Normally, this would be two units pitted against one another, but it could also be several units against a single enemy unit, or long chain of units from both sides. Sometimes certain rules may be applied for the first round of combat. The round of combat after it successfully charged an enemy unit is the first round of combat. Sometimes a unit that was previously engaged in combat has all of its opponents removed since the end of the previous melee phase. Such units follow the rules described in No More Foes. Here is the round of combat sequence. Start of the round of combat. Choose a weapon. Make way. Issue and accept duels, determine the initiative order, roll melee attacks starting with the first initiative step, allocate attacks, roll to hit, to wound, saves and remove casualties, repeat first two steps. Calculate which side wins the round of combat, losers roll break test. Roll panic test for units within 6 inches of a friendly broken unit, decide to restrain or to pursue, roll flee distances, roll pursue distances, move fleeing units, move pursuing units, post-combat pilots and post-combat reforms. Combat reforms, end of the round. The units that charged in the previous charge, gaining +1 to agility. Models that are in the base contact with the enemy attack during their initiative step can provide attacks. Also, we are having supporting attacks. Models in the second rank and not in base contact with an enemy models can perform a close combat attacks across models in the first rank directly in front of them. On this figure you may see which models can attack. R&F models engaged in combat may be in positions in the unit where, based on the general rules for allocating attacks, they can either allocate attacks towards enemy characters or champions, now allocate any attacks at all due to enemy models fighting a duel. Such models may elect to allocate their close combat attacks non-champion R&F models of the same unit instead, exactly as if their R&F models were in the position of the enemy character or champion. Note that swirling melee cannot be used by characters. On this table you may see the close combat to hit, and on this figure you have an example for allocating attacks. When you are issuing a duel, characters or champions engaged in combat may issue a duel, and after that the active player nominate one of their characters or champions, provided that there is at least one enemy champion or character able to accept it. If the duel was refused or no duel was issued, the reactive player may nominate one of their characters or champions that did not refuse the active player's duel, issue a duel. If you will not accept the duel, the chosen model has its discipline test set to 0, loses stubborn, cannot perform any melee attacks, loses Rally Around the Flag ability. In case of battle, standard bearer doesn't add +1 to its side combat score. The effect ends at the end of the player's turn in which the combat ends. When the chosen character accepts or issues a duel, at the end of the player turn, if there no longer is an enemy model engaged in the same combat that could accept a duel. During a duel, any excess health points loses cost count towards the combat score, up to a maximum +3. After the round of combat, you should check the combat score. You check lost health points on enemy units, +1 for each health point, +1 for overkill for each health point to a maximum +3, +1 for a charge, +1 for bonus rank for each full rank after the first, but maximum +3. Standard +1, flank bonuses +1 or +2, and rear bonuses +2 or +3. On this table, you may see the combat score summary. If the difference in the score was 6-3, the units on the losing side making the break test with a -3 modifier to their discipline. Also, when you are having a steadfast, the unit that have more full ranks than other unit are considered steadfast. Steadfast units ignore discipline modifiers from the combat score difference. Disrupted ranks unit cannot use steadfast rule. Sometimes a unit destroys all enemy units in the base contact and finds itself no longer engaged in combat. It cannot provide combat score bonuses. These units always count as winning the combat, and they can make overrun action, post-combat pivot or post-combat reform. Pursue is making when you are trying to catch the opponent's unit. When opponent's unit is fleeing, you both roll 2d6. If your roll was higher than the opponent's, you killed that unit. On this figure you may see the split in combat. If the fleeing unit first obstacle would be the board edge, move the unit straight forward until it touches the board edge, and after that follow the rules for pursuing of the board. When the unit pursues of the board, it will leave the battlefield and will return during the owner's next movement phase, using the rules arriving as ambushers. Post-combat pivot. It's actually the movement when the units pivot around its center and or may reorganize models with the front rank. Reform is the actual reform maneuver of the unit. If you are doing so, your unit loses scoring until the start of the following player turn and may not declare any charges in the following player's turn. Here on the figure you may see the example of two units pursuing into the same enemy unit.